Yeah, man! Welcome to Frick Flicks, and welcome to Solomon Kane. How does an evil man find redemption in life? Is it enough to renounce his violent and sinful past, devoting his remaining days to peace and charity? Or should he put his brutal talents to better use in service of the righteous? This is a question proposed by the 2009 sword and sorcery film, Solomon Kane. Well, kind of. I just thought that'd make for a good intro. So today, for our first ever installment of Frick Flicks, we'll revisit that forgotten gem from what may be a nostalgic era for some. A film that, despite its lofty ambitions, never quite made the mark it hoped for. Of course, there will be spoilers, so check the movie out first if you're interested. Now, Solomon Kane was a character created by Robert E. Howard, who was also the man behind Conan the Barbarian. In fact, this Texan author is credited as being the father of sword and sorcery, a subgenre of fantasy that often tells much darker and grittier tales that focus more on individual struggles. It's sort of the edgy little brother of high fantasy, such as Lord of the Rings. And interestingly enough, Howard's works actually predate that of J.R.R. Tolkien. Despite tragically taking his own life at just 30 years old, Howard wrote many short stories, and his impact as an author has grown even more in its influence in the decades since. Like his friend and colleague H.P. Lovecraft, Robert E. Howard was a pulp fiction writer, with his stories being published in the magazine Weird Tales. Now, one of his more popular series was Solomon Kane, who first appeared in the August 1928 edition of Weird Tales, in the short story called Red Shadows. I have made an audiobook for one of the Kane stories, Skulls in the Stars, on my other channel. It's one of the spookier and more interesting ones. He fights a ghost with his bare hands in that one. As a character, Solomon Kane is written to be extremely righteous and chivalrous. He is an English Puritan that travels the world to vanquish evil by all means in the name of God. That's basically his entire purpose. He's not the most complex of characters. Unlike most fantasy settings, which are often set in fictional medieval-style otherworld settings, Solomon Kane takes place in a fictionalized version of our world during the late 16th and early 17th centuries. Of course, there are plenty of supernatural or magical elements though. Since his pulp fiction days, Kane has appeared in numerous media, including a comic book series published by Marvel. However, he's probably best known now for the 2009 film, where he is portrayed by James Purefoy, in which Kane is depicted as a troubled man who must come to terms with his violent past, as he aims to redeem his soul through virtuous protection of the innocent, rather than being just a strict force of Christian good fighting against evil. The early production of the film was quite troubled. In 1997, the rights to the character were acquired. However, it would be years before any real work was done on the movie. Initially, Christopher Lambert of Highlander fame was offered the role, but after numerous changes in production, and by the time things finally got underway in 2008, it was being directed by M.J. Bassett and starring James Purefoy as the titular character. The film was ambitious and had a decent budget to work with, around $40 million, which is about mid-range in movie budget terms, but it was intended to be the first in a trilogy, with this installment serving as an origin story of the character. That did not happen, as the film was a box office flop, earning back less than half of its budget in the box office. However, the film did receive mixed to favorable reviews, with praise being directed at Purefoy's performance. James Purefoy had previously been the original actor of V from V for Vendetta, but left production early on for unknown reasons and was replaced by Hugo Weaving, so ideally the role of Kane would spring Purefoy into further stardom, with the character making him a household name. After the commercial failure of Solomon Kane, James Purefoy has still gone on to have a noteworthy career, such as starring in the show The Following. But anyways, that's enough of a preamble. Let's get into the movie. So what I'll be doing is kind of just going through the film and giving my thoughts on whatever I feel like. I'm not a professional movie reviewer or anything, but I know what I like and what I don't. So, yeah. Our story begins with a much different Solomon Kane than what we've come to expect from the classic character. This Kane is a bit of an asshole, a merciless mercenary that has little remorse for his enemies or allies. He's shown to be ruthless and greedy, in fact, almost absurdly so. The fight scenes in the movie are well choreographed, with Purefoy performing most of his own stunts. While it is certainly violent, the film isn't overly graphic or gory, but it doesn't shy away from the more brutal aspects of the source material. It also includes some of the horror elements as well. When Kane and his men are searching for treasure, we see a glimpse of an otherworldly creature that looks to be the vile child of a Dementor from Harry Potter and a Hunger from Elder Scrolls. And after Kane murders his own soldier in cold blood, they attack and kill the rest of the group, save for Kane, who now finds himself alone in the throne room, alone with that precious treasure. Of course, he is not truly alone though, as some spooky happenings begin to take place. First is the Night King, then a ring wraith, or rather the Devil's Reaper, who is here to claim Kane's soul for all of his wrongdoings. Because of some deal? Honestly, Kane isn't even sure why, but the Reaper tries to kill him. However, since he's a Giga Chad, and we're only 8 minutes in, Kane fights him off and escapes by jumping into the sea. Thus, we begin the movie proper. I think as far as an intro goes, it's an okay opening for the film. It introduces many of the key aspects of the story, such as Kane's wrongdoings and his selfish greediness, but it kind of feels like they tried to cram too much into a relatively short segment. I don't mind the angle they were going for, with Kane being an evil privateer that seeks redemption over the course of the story. It probably makes for a more interesting narrative overall, rather than him just being a force for good lacking in any real personality. But the beginning of the movie makes him cartoonishly evil.
I am the only devil here.
Like they really wanted to drive home the point that he's a scumbag, so much so that it makes his character development sort of unbelievable. He does such an extreme 180 in this movie, over the span of like 30 seconds, that it's almost jarring. The original character of Solomon Kane is notorious for seeing good and evil as black and white, and that is something that is shown in the film as well, but by implementing themes of salvation and redemption, it addresses a more gray area, which I think is fine, but focusing so much on that ends up detracting from what is meant to be Solomon Kane. I know the movie is like an hour and 35 minutes, minus the credits, but I honestly feel like it could have used another half hour of runtime, especially in fleshing out Kane's backstory. It would have been more interesting to see the evil Kane get more screen time, maybe providing some more complexity and nuance to his character, instead of him just being a dick. That way his path towards redemption feels more earned later on. Anyways, we rejoin Kane a year later, who now resides in a monastery in England. This Solomon Kane is a remorseful and very humbled version of himself, having renounced violence and donated all of his wealth to the church. Now you have to wonder if Kane is really regretful and ashamed of his past actions, or is he just afraid of his soul being damned? In other words, is his repentance because of a newfound understanding of his misdeeds, or because of that same selfish desire that seeks only what is best for himself, in this case, not being sent to hell? Regardless, he's been scared straight, and having covered his body with religious markings, and being surrounded by monks, he is safe from the demons hunting him. However, Kane's peaceful existence is thrown into the fray when the abbot kicks him out because God tells him to, I guess. Kane sets out on his journey, his pilgrimage, and this is where my favorite act of the movie begins. And I just have to say, this is a really good looking film, especially in the first half. The cinematography, the set pieces, whatever you want to call it, the scenery looks great. There's a certain charm that movies from this era have. It's like they found the right balance of real-world locations, practical special effects, CGI, lighting, and whatever else to make the settings come alive, but also feel like art. Eventually, Kane encounters a Puritan family on the road, who offer him a ride, but which he declines. Soon after that, he is ambushed by 3 bandits. Now obviously, Kane could just slap these guys around with his dick if he wanted, but since he is now a man of peace, and believes engaging in violence will once again jeopardize his soul, he does not fight back. I'm not really sure why he thinks that. I guess he thinks he can't stray even slightly from the path, even in self-defense. He does still have his plot armor though, so they don't actually kill him, just rob him, rough him up, and leave him for dead. We then have our first flashback from Kane's childhood, who turns out was born of nobility. His father is kind of a prick, and since Solomon is the second born son, he is to be sent to live at the abbey, while his older brother Marcus is set to be the heir to the family's lands and wealth. Marcus, you guessed it, is also a prick. I guess it runs in the family. Solomon does not wish to live a life in the Abbey, and instead runs away from home and is also banished, eventually becoming a feared privateer. Just after leaving, he comes across his brother assaulting a girl, in case you didn't think he was a bad guy yet, and he intervenes. His brother, though, easily overpowers him and taunts him, and like a lot of the bad guys in this movie, is cartoonishly evil. Solomon pushes Big Bro away, who then stumbles and falls off the cliff to his presumed death. It was an accident on Solomon's part, but the guy was kinda asking for it. With that, Solomon flees his ancestral home, never to return, and leaving his family's lineage in shambles, as, just like that, Papa Kane lost both of his sons. Solomon Kane awakens in the care of the Puritan family he passed earlier, the Crowthorns, who are heading to the New World, but they take him in and nurse him back to health. These are some of the best scenes in my opinion. Kane begins to bond with the family, and they accept him without question, despite him coming clean to them about his past misdeeds. While traveling with the Crowthorns, Kane is at peace again, and seems to have found purpose in aiding them as he can, albeit limited, as he remains a man of peace. The daughter, Meredith, makes Kane some new clothes, and of course, this is where he first dons the hat. That hat is so damn badass. It's like a pissed off pilgrim. Now, to a keen eye, this aesthetic may be reminiscent of Van Helsing, starring Hugh Jackman, which came out a few years prior. And that seems to be because the filmmakers of Van Helsing based the character's look off the classic Solomon Kane character, or at least that's the theory. Anyways, the travelers encounter the ruins of a village, the buildings recently destroyed, the inhabitants now scattered corpses with their eyes burnt out. Now we're starting to get into some of the more horror elements of the story, something I wish we got more of. Kane surmises that there was a witch burning here that went terribly wrong. The pilgrims do find one survivor, a young girl, who they take with them. Kane is suspicious, however, and that night attempts to force her to wear a cross, which reveals her to in fact be the witch, and she disappears into the night, but not before marking Meredith.
The devil is waiting for you, Kane!
Meanwhile, in the countryside, trouble is a-brewin'. We see those three dumbasses from earlier, and they are conscripted to fight in the undead forces of Malachi, a sorcerer who is raised in villages and raised in hell. He's going to be our main antagonist of the film, although we won't really see him until much later. First, we meet his second in command, the Masked Rider, whose identity is hidden, but who does the bidding of his sorcerer overlord, and is the muscle behind the whole operation. We rejoin Kane and the Crowthorns as they are making camp again, and later that night, Kane is awoken by the youngest boy, Samuel, and they investigate a noise, seeing the undead army taking prisoners. Kane sends Samuel back to warn the family, but by the time Kane himself returns, they've already been attacked and taken as hostages, with Samuel being held at knife point. The Masked Rider presents Kane with an ultimatum. Kill the man threatening Samuel, or watch him die. Believing his soul will be damned once more if he acts, though, Kane refuses, and as a result, Samuel has his throat slit. Yeah, that's right, they killed the kid. Now, I like that the movie was willing to do something extreme like this, but it feels a bit off that Kane refuses to act here. I don't know if it's intended, but it shows that he's still quite selfish. You would think his newfound bond with the family would have made him fight regardless of what fate would befall him, but no. Instead, he's just melodramatic here, questioning God's intent. Kane finally does get over himself and says, "Frick it, it's Solomon Kane time."
If I kill you, I am bound for hell. It is a price I shall gladly pay.
He begins slashing through the henchmen, but there are too many, and the oldest son, Edward, who had like 2 lines, is killed in the fray, and Meredith is captured and transported away by the Masked Rider. In the aftermath, all that are left are Kane, the mother Catherine, and the gravely wounded father, William, who with his dying breath pleads for Kane to rescue their daughter, telling our boy that his soul too will be rescued in the process, something that at this point Kane has little choice but to believe. If only he had said that before his sons were murdered. Driven by a desire for revenge, salvation, and to save an innocent, Solomon Kane, now unburdened by all this peace nonsense, sets out on his quest. And this is the hell yeah part of the movie. Donning a black cape, and god, that nifty pilgrim hat. That buckle is so fucking cocky. Kane begins his search. He is ruthless, like we saw at the beginning of the film, but now he's a good guy, so it's chill. He finds his way towards an abandoned church, where he takes refuge and chats with the remaining priest. This priest, you may recognize, is the actor who also plays the guy with the fricked up eye in Pirates of the Caribbean. He's actually in a lot of stuff. Here he's just as odd as you'd expect, but that completely goes over Kane's head, and it soon becomes apparent that he is harboring a dark secret. Honestly, I don't think this guy is much of a priest. He shows Kane his flock, his former churchgoers, that have been turned ghoulish by the sorcerer, and he harbors them in the cellar for protection. This is the creepiest part of the movie. The way they all just stand down there. This whole church scene is cool, and I feel like the film could have used some more horror like this, and the one earlier with the witch, because after this it's mostly just a generic action movie, which I guess I just don't find that interesting. As you've probably guessed, this guy is deranged and pushes Kane into the pit to feed his flock. Kane manages to fight his way out and escape in a claustrophobic scene. But he finds himself then face to face with the Three Stooges from earlier. No longer a pacifist, Kane makes quick work of them and interrogates the last one to find out where Meredith is. But when the goon tells him that she's dead, an enraged Kane feeds him to the ghouls. Now this was a satisfying scene where he gets his revenge and all that, but after this I feel the movie really starts to slog, especially since the next time we see our boy, he's now depressed and shrinks away his sorrows, resigned to his damned fate. Finally, he's a relatable character. He's moody and kind of annoying now. I really just don't like these sections in movies where the hero has to doubt themselves. I mean, we all know he's going to snap out of it, so it just feels like a waste of time. To me, this whole scene where he turns into an old bitch just drags the movie's momentum to a screeching halt. He had finally just started fighting back, and now he's on his bullshit again. Kane's old shipmate finds him, but he brushes him off and does not resist when the inn is attacked, and he himself is literally crucified. Of course, Meredith is conveniently in a wagon passing by and yells to him, which gives him the desire to fight back again. This scene is so overly dramatic and over the top, but damn, does James Purefoy not somehow make it not completely awful?
God, give me.
After freeing himself from the cross, for the second time in this movie, it's Solomon Kane time. Never mind, he's too injured. He's saved here though by his former crew / the rebels against Malachi, who's basically taken over the entire area. Back at their hideout, where Kane is nursed back to health for the second time, and yes, that is the Hound, they plan their assault on Malachi's fortress, which just so happens to be at Kane's ancestral home. What a coincidence. They sneak inside and battle ensues. When Kane gets separated, he winds up in the dungeons, where he frees some prisoners and reunites with his father. Papa Kane tells Solomon that after his brother's fall, Marcus did not actually die, but was in a coma. He brought in a healer, Malachi, to wake him up, which he succeeded in doing. However, the sorcerer tricked him and instead took over the castle and turned Marcus into the Masked Rider, bound to his master's will and lacking in any personality, but still an improvement on the character we saw earlier. Now, it's also implied that Papa Kane made some sort of deal with the sorcerer, and by extension, the devil, who needs to keep the father alive for some reason. So Papa Kane requests that Solomon kill him, freeing him from his torments, and he complies and shoots him in the chest. This scene would maybe have more emotional weight to it if we'd actually seen Papa Kane for more than one short scene, and it wasn't of him banishing his child son because he didn't want to be a monk. Now he's remorseful, but I don't know, I don't buy it. I don't think he earns his redemption at all. Honestly, everyone in this movie is either a complete dick or a recovering dick. While the rebels are still fighting, Kane seeks out Malachi in the throne room, which is a nice parallel to the beginning of the film, when he also enters the throne room, but instead of seeking wealth, he now has much more noble reasons. We finally meet Malachi, and I'm sorry, but this guy looks like a complete clown. The scripture on his face, the absolutely jacked hairline, with the long dreads, it ain't it. I'm not even sure what the hell to even say here. I think a lot of the monster and villain designs in this movie actually look pretty good, but the sorcerer just looks so damn goofy, and this scene just gets worse from here. Anyways, it's sort of implied implied by Malakath that Papa Kane sold Solomon's soul to the devil in exchange for Marcus's return. I'm not sure how you can sell someone else's soul, that's kinda bullshit, but I guess so. Now this would explain why the Devil's Reaper was after Kane at the beginning of the film, and why there were all those mirrors and shit, as those are a hallmark of sorcery in this story. But if that's right, I would assume that this deal had been made around that time, which was like a year ago movie time. Which makes sense because all of this shit's been going down recently. However, that whole fall business happened like at least 20 years ago. So my question is, how long was Marcus in a coma? When did Malachi come into the picture? How long has he controlled the estate? Was he just chilling in the castle this whole time with the father in the dungeons? I guess I'm just not really sure on the timeline here. Also, it's hinted that Kane's soul is forfeit for living a life of misdeeds. So is the Reaper after him because of his father's deal or his own sin? It feels like the writers were going off of two very different ideas here. After Solomon brushes off getting stabbed from behind, he and Marcus have a one-on-one duel, where Solomon kills his brother, who is too far gone to be saved at this point, but honestly, who really cares? Oh yeah, and Meredith is here by the way. Malachi uses her innocent blood to summon forth a Timu Balrog from hell to claim Solomon's soul for his master, the devil. In fact, getting Solomon into the throne room for this was his grand plan apparently. I'm not sure how that works, and why you couldn't just kill him when you had like 5 chances already, and like 3 alone in the last 2 minutes. Now, it's not that this thing looks bad per se, but it just feels so out of place here. Most of the CGI and special effects in the movie look pretty good in my opinion, but they're often kept in shadows and darkness to keep them from being ridiculous looking, while keeping them more mysterious and foreboding. But this creature here is just so big and bright that it really feels off and doesn't match the rest of the film's vibe. It seems like such an unnecessary final boss. Like, I'm very aware that I'm watching a CGI monster right now, but I'm very unaware that I'm watching a Solomon Kane movie, because it feels like the movie quickly got very generic, and he hasn't even worn the hat in like 30 minutes. It's just a regular ass fantasy movie now. Kane just runs around for a few minutes avoiding it, and runs up to Malachi and basically just shoots him in the head. Yeah, that's how this epic showdown ends. Malachi, this cunning sorcerer, just stands there and gets shot. The boy can disappear into black smoke and summon demons, but he's just completely powerless when a malnourished teenage girl pushes him away. Like, I don't understand what he's even doing here. I know people will say he's overconfident and whatnot, but this is a monumental fuck up right here on his part. Some more CGI stuff happens, with the Timu Balrog being sent back to hell, and Kane seemingly with it. However, it was only the devil's claim on his soul that vanished. So our boy Kane wakes up in Meredith's arms, now fully redeemed. And with the evil defeated, Solomon Kane sets out to find more evil to vanquish. Oh, and he finally put the hat back on. I think I first watched this movie back when I was in middle school, around 2010. I had never heard of it, but I thought it was a surprisingly good watch for some random movie I stumbled upon on Netflix. I stumbled upon it again a few months ago, only really remembering that I liked it the first time, and for the most part, I still did, and still do, even after watching it more times for this video. To be clear, this isn't my favorite movie or anything, but I do think it has a lot going for it, and I thought it'd be interesting to talk about, as it is unique. I think the film gets a lot of things right and does a lot of things well. Obviously, the biggest praise here has to go to James Purefoy's performance as Solomon Kane. From the accent to the fight scenes, he's perfect as the somber Puritan Avenger. It's a shame that he didn't get quite the recognition or boost to his fame that he deserved.
My soul is damned. Satan's creatures will take me should I stray from the path of peace.
While some of the characters are very flat, I do think most of the supporting actors played their parts well. I especially like the guy who played William.
Then do not stray, Master Kane. Do not stray.
I like that there's no forced romance either. A lot of movies seem to think they have to cram in a love interest. Instead, Solomon Kane just focuses on its plot and main character's personal arc, which I appreciate. The film itself also looks pretty damn good at times. The set pieces, the action sequences, the monster designs, and most of the special effects I think are visually appealing for the time, with a few exceptions, especially towards the latter portions of the movie. You can maybe credit a lot of that to the decent budget of the film, but there's certainly more massive movies that look much worse. I can't play it, but it also has a nice soundtrack that helps the film capture its atmosphere. It has some charm to it that I feel a lot of modern movies lack, but it's not exactly something revolutionary. One of my main issues with the film has to be the pacing of it. I really think it could have benefited from like another half hour of runtime. Sometimes things move slowly, which is fine, but other times a lot happens very quickly. I think if we had seen more of Kane growing up with his father and brother, and some more of his life as a privateer, it would have helped flesh out these characters and make them feel less one-dimensional. Or honestly, better yet, they could have just done away with the whole ancestral home thing. I'm not sure it really fits that well with the classic character of Solomon Kane anyway. By the end, it feels nothing like the source material. Again, I think the first half of the movie is much stronger than the second half. I liked the scenes with the Crowthorns. I liked the scenes of his initial search for Meredith, but I really did not like the final battle and villain reveal. Overall though, I think it's an enjoyable watch that does far more right than wrong, and it's certainly worth checking out for people who enjoy this type of flick. I would personally give it a Frick score of 7 out of 10. I'd give the first half like a 9 and the second like a 5, so that's about how it averages out. Now I asked you mains for your ratings, and at the time of this video, the film currently sits with a main score of 2.92 popcorns out of 4. Someone maybe double check that math. I'm not surprised that we never got a sequel, as it was a box office flop, but I would have liked to have seen a follow-up that moves past the whole redemption angle and drew more from the source material, allowing for Solomon Kane to just be Solomon Kane. Hopefully we'll see the Puritan Avenger return in some manner. I appreciate you mains that took the time to watch this movie when I suggested it, and for submitting your ratings. If you're interested in being a part of the next film's main score, then I would suggest you keep an eye on my community tab, where I'll keep you updated. This was my first video of this kind, and it took a hell of a lot longer to make than I thought it would. So it may be a minute before we do this again, but we'll definitely be back with it, as I have a lot of movies I'd like to talk about. Until then, stay nifty.
Yeah, man!